10 years. A decade of youth, blood, tears, and sleepless nights. I poured every ounce of my strength into transforming Sterling Enterprises, my father's outdated tech company, from a failing business into a $250 million empire. And yet, at this very moment, in the celebration meant to honor my success, my father beamed, raised his wineglass, and spoke in a tone both proud and final. "You've done well, Rose, but now, it's Jason's turn to take over the company." The words cut through me like a sharp blade. The room suddenly felt cold, the cheerful chatter around me fading into a distant murmur. My fingers tightened around the stem of my wineglass, but I kept my smile intact. More than 10 years in the corporate world had taught me one crucial lesson: never let them see you break. The party was held in our family estate, a lavish, opulent space filled with congratulations and clinking glasses under the glow of crystal chandeliers. Family, friends, business partners, and the board of directors were all in attendance. This should have been my night, the moment when all my hard work was recognized. Instead, it became a stage where my father handed over my achievements to an undeserving successor. Jason, my younger brother, sat across the table, pretending to bow his head humbly, but I caught the glint of satisfaction in his eyes. He had never put in the effort to understand the business, yet here he was, sitting comfortably, reaping the rewards. I swallowed the rising lump of pain in my throat and let out a soft chuckle. "Really, father?" I asked, my voice light as a breeze, but sharp with meaning. He nodded, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. "Yes, Rose. You've done an incredible job. But a family company must be passed down to the son. You understand, don't you?" Understand? I had spent my entire life proving that I didn't need to be a son to lead Sterling Enterprises. I had closed multi-million-dollar deals, secured a place for the company in the top 50 fastest-growing tech firms in the US, and built a loyal, powerhouse team. But none of it was enough. I took a deep breath. I wouldn't let them see me fall. Lifting my wineglass, I tilted my head slightly toward Jason and smirked. "Well then, congratulations, Jason. I wish you luck." I didn't say success because I knew he would fail. Around us, glasses were raised, toasts were made, and smiles were exchanged. My mother sat quietly at the corner of the table, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. Perhaps regret, though, as always, she said nothing. She had never challenged my father's decisions. I didn't eat another bite. I simply sat there, letting the empty words of praise wash over me like meaningless noise. As the party drew to a close, I stood, smoothing down my black velvet dress. Before leaving the table, I cast one last look at my father and Jason. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just smiled. They thought they had removed me. What my father and Jason didn't know was that I hadn't just built a company. I had built an empire within it. And by tomorrow morning, they would realize who truly held the power. As a child, I grew up in rushed dinners, tense board meetings, and nights when my father came home late, his eyes bloodshot with exhaustion. Back then, Sterling Enterprises was just a small tech firm, barely surviving on a handful of contracts. I lost count of the times I overheard my mother whisper to him in the kitchen about overdue loans, or how many times he had to mortgage assets just to keep the company afloat. I saw everything. But what my father never saw, or refused to see, was that I had dreams of my own. From a young age I was captivated by spreadsheets, strategy meetings, and the open laptop my father left on the dining table. By the time I was 12, I had already begun researching the tech market, predicting the next big trends. But I was never the one he placed his hopes on. Jason was. I still remember the day I graduated from business school, top of my class, with a thesis on market expansion strategies for mid-sized companies. Heart pounding, I stepped into my father's office, eager and breathless. "Dad, I want to work for the company." He looked up from his screen, frowning. "Rose, you just graduated. Find another company where you can gain experience first before thinking about working here." I had anticipated that answer. I've learned enough. I know the company's problems. If things don't change, Sterling Enterprises won't survive another 5 years. My father smiled, but it wasn't a smile of joy. It was a smile filled with doubt. You're only 22, do you really think you can run a company? I clenched my fists. Not run it, but I can help. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. Rose, this company isn't meant for you. One day Jason will take over. If you really want to work here, you should accept a more suitable position. A more suitable position? I frowned. Assistant director. Or human resources. I scoffed. He had decided my fate long before I ever had the chance to prove myself. But I didn't give up. I started working at the company with a meaningless title. No authority, no real acknowledgement. But I watched, I learned, and I waited. I studied every number, every contract, every mistake the company had made. I found gaps my father never saw, or refused to see. And when the company faced a financial crisis in 2014, I had the answer. I saved the company. I was the one who proposed the digital transformation strategy, turning Sterling Enterprises from an outdated software firm into a cloud data service provider. I was the one who negotiated with partners, securing the company's first $10 million contract. Enough to pull it back from the brink of bankruptcy. I was the one who changed everything. But when my father spoke about the company's miraculous recovery, he never once mentioned me. And Jason? Throughout that entire period, he never set foot in the company. He was too busy chasing one ridiculous business venture after another. First a custom shoe startup, then a pointless dating app. Over and over he failed. But every time he failed, my father was always ready to fund his next attempt. And me? I never received a single cent from him. But I didn't need it. I kept working, I kept pushing the company forward. I started buying up shares, little by little, every time my father needed to raise capital. He didn't care, as long as the company kept growing, he was willing to sign any contract I put in front of him. I never asked for recognition. I only wanted to prove that I could do it. Yet even after I transformed Sterling Enterprises from a dying business into a $250 million empire, my father still didn't trust me. That night, when he announced that Jason would take over the company, I realized something. I could work harder than anyone. I could dedicate my entire life to this company. But to my father, I would never be enough. I looked at Jason, a man who had done nothing to deserve the position he was handed. I looked at my father, a man who had always seen me as nothing more than a temporary tool. I understood now. They didn't see me as the heir. But they didn't know that I hadn't just built a company. I had built a foundation of power in my hands. And they wouldn't push me aside so easily. Tomorrow morning, they would realize I was the one in control. I didn't leave the party right away. I kept my smile, raised my glass, and toasted to Jason, as if I had fully accepted my father's decision. The voices around me cheered, offering their congratulations. But I didn't hear a thing. Because in my mind, the battle had already begun. After leaving the estate, I drove straight home. But I didn't rest. I sat at my desk in my home office, opened my laptop, and started reviewing everything. They thought they could cast me aside so easily? I spent 10 years building this company. I was never naive enough to believe that my efforts would be recognized just because I worked hard. I knew the rules of the game. And I knew they had made a grave mistake by underestimating me. I opened the list of shareholders and investment agreements from the past years. Over time, I had acquired shares from long-standing executives, early investors, and even from my father himself, whenever the company needed to raise capital. He never noticed. He was too confident that he would always be the one in control. But I was different. I never allowed myself to be put in a position of weakness. I scanned through the documents. Numbers flickered across the screen, and as I compiled them, one truth became as clear as daylight. I owned 60% of the company. I couldn't believe my eyes. I checked again. and again. But the truth remained unchanged. Sterling Enterprises was no longer my father's company. It belonged to me. I opened a file titled, Board of Directors Governance Terms. It was the most important document signed when the company underwent restructuring 5 years ago. And in it, there was a clear clause. Any change in the CEO position must be approved by the controlling shareholder. And that person was me. I laughed. Did they really think they could get rid of me with a mere announcement? Jason would never sit in the CEO's chair. My father wouldn't be able to stop me. I had the power, the legal authority, and most importantly, I had a plan. Did they think I would walk into the office tomorrow morning, quietly accept defeat, and step aside? No. I would make them understand that I was never someone who could be cast aside so easily. I sent a series of emails to the company's legal department, requesting a full review of ownership rights and governance terms. I contacted the bank, ensuring that no financial transactions could be made without my approval. I even sent an email to the board of directors, calling for an emergency meeting first thing tomorrow. My father and Jason thought I would obediently walk away. But when they arrived at the office in the morning, they would see that I wasn't going anywhere. I glanced out the window. The city still slept under the dim glow of streetlights. But I wasn't sleeping. I had been preparing for this moment for years. I had done everything to prove my worth. But my father never saw it. He never intended for me to inherit this company. Fine. Then I would take what should have been mine. I closed my laptop and took a deep breath. The battle had begun, and I had no intention of losing. 8:45 a.m. I walked into Sterling Enterprises just like any other day, but today, there was something different in the air. I felt the furtive glances as I passed through the lobby. A few employees whispered among themselves, only to quickly turn away when I met their eyes. Word of my father's decision from last night had surely spread. They thought I had lost. They thought I would quietly step aside. I kept my back straight, each step sharp and deliberate against the marble floor. The sound of my heels echoed with unwavering confidence. Today was not the day I left. Today was the day I took control. 9:00 a.m. A sharp knock echoed through the office before the door swung open. My father entered first. He wore a dark gray suit, his presence commanding, exuding the confidence of a general stepping into a battle he was certain he would win. Jason followed closely behind, that smug half-smile on his lips. The one I despised. He was wearing a brand-new suit, likely already prepared for his role as CEO. How laughable. My father strode straight to my desk, not bothering with any pleasantries. "Rose, I assume you understand the situation now." I lifted my gaze, meeting his cold, unwavering eyes. "I understand perfectly, father," I replied, my voice steady. He nodded, as if he had been expecting my compliance. "Good, then let's begin the transition. Jason will need your guidance for a few weeks before he officially takes over." I let out a soft chuckle. "Transition?" I raised an eyebrow. "You think this decision has already been made?" Jason crossed his arms, tilting his head at me like I was some desperate fool clinging to a lost cause. "Rose, don't make this difficult," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "We both know who's going to run this company." I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, unwavering. "Yes, we do," I said slowly, "but it's not you." The smirk on Jason's face faltered. "Rose, don't be childish," my father interjected, his voice firm with authority. "There's no need to drag this out." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I calmly reached for the remote on my desk and pressed a button. The large screen on the wall flickered to life, displaying a document that carried all the power in the room. Sterling Enterprises shareholder agreement and governance terms. Jason's eyes narrowed, my father's brow furrowed. "What the hell is this?" Jason muttered. I stood up, slowly walking toward the screen. "This," I said, my voice controlled but razor sharp, "is the legal document stating that any change in the CEO position must be approved by the controlling shareholder." I turned, locking eyes with my father. "And father, the person holding 60% of the shares right now, I let the silence stretch, letting the weight of the truth sink in. Is me. For a moment, the room fell into absolute silence. My father froze. Jason stared at me, then let out a dry laugh. But this time, there was no arrogance in it. This can't be right, he shook his head. Dad owns this company. He's the one in control. I smirked. Really? I picked up another document and placed it on the desk. Father sold me 15% more shares in 2017 when the company needed expansion capital. In 2019, during the major lawsuit, he leveraged another 10% to me. And he never took them back. I stepped closer to Jason, lowering my voice. But every word was laced with absolute power. You think you're taking over this company? I tilted my head slightly. You don't hold a single ounce of power. Jason's face went pale. Dad, this is a joke, right? He turned to my father, almost desperate. Tell her she can't do this. But my father said nothing. He understood. I saw the calculations in his eyes. He was scrambling to find a way to turn the situation around. But there was no way. I had already won the moment they tried to cast me aside. 9:15 a.m. Jason lost control. He slammed his hand on the desk. No, I won't let you steal this company. I didn't even blink. I'm not stealing anything, Jason, I said evenly. I'm simply keeping what was already mine. He turned to my father again, but this time, there was nothing he could do for him. I was the majority shareholder. I was the one in control of Sterling Enterprises. My father finally exhaled, his voice heavy with resignation. Rose? Do you really want to turn your family into your enemies? I met his gaze, unwavering. No, father, I said, my voice firm. You made me your enemy when you tried to take away what I built. The room was filled with their defeat. Jason clenched his fists, but he was powerless. My father sank into his chair as if the authority he once held had drained from him completely. I had won. But I knew. The real battle had only just begun. I had anticipated that my father and Jason wouldn't accept defeat easily. Less than 2 days after our confrontation at the office, the first signs of their counterattack emerged. I felt it in the shift of the company's atmosphere, the hesitant glances from executives, the whispers spreading like wildfire. They weren't giving up. They were fighting back. 10:00 a.m. I walked into the boardroom where all the board members were already seated. Some avoided my gaze. Others stared at me with hesitation. Just as I expected. My father and Jason had leveraged their old connections, pressuring the board. The longtime executives, those who had once been loyal to my father, were wavering. Rose? One board member spoke up. We need to discuss the company's stability. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. Stability? I echoed, smirking. Yes, another chimed in. Many investors are concerned about the sudden leadership change. They fear that your father and brother stepping down from leadership could impact market confidence. I understood immediately. This was my father's play. He couldn't overthrow me through legal means. But he could sow fear. Make the board doubt me. Make them believe I couldn't maintain the confidence of shareholders in the market. I scanned the room, studying each person carefully. I saw hesitation, fear, and the invisible strings being pulled behind the scenes. They had been manipulated. But I had been prepared for this. I turned to the large screen behind me, where sharp financial data appeared in bold, undeniable numbers. I understand that you have concerns, I said, my voice slow but razor sharp. But let me remind you of a simple fact. I pointed at the numbers on the screen. Sterling Enterprises' revenue had increased by 350% over the past 5 years. Our long-term contracts with major corporations had grown by 72% since my father's tenure. Last year we achieved the highest net profit in the company's history. I looked each board member in the eye, my voice cutting like a blade. Every single one of these achievements happened under my leadership. Not my father's, not Jason's. Mine. Silence. And this? I swiped to another chart. displaying a different set of figures. Shows the period when my father and Jason were in charge. Financial gaps, bad debt, poor business decisions. A few board members visibly paled. Are you worried about me taking over? I arched an eyebrow. Or are you worried that my father and Jason are simply trying to reclaim the power they lost? The weight of silence filled the room. I had regained control. But I knew they weren't done fighting yet. That afternoon, the media picked up the story. An article appeared in Business Weekly, its bold headline sprawled across the page. Leadership crisis at Sterling Enterprises. Is Rose Sterling too aggressive? I laughed. How predictable. I skimmed through the content. There were no direct accusations, but the entire article subtly painted me as power-hungry, implying that my father and Jason being removed from leadership was a reckless decision. I knew exactly who was behind this. My father was using the media to sabotage me. But if he thought I would sit back and do nothing, he was mistaken. I picked up my phone and called a journalist I had known for years. I have a story for you, I said, my voice steady. But you'll need to move fast. 1 hour later, I sent him a complete file. Evidence of my father's financial misconduct during his time running the company. Jason's failed investments that had cost the company millions. Contracts signed solely for personal gain. Benefiting the family, not the business. The article was published the very next day. Inside Sterling Enterprises. The financial secrets James Sterling didn't want you to know. The impact was immediate. Investors shifted their support to me. The board had no choice but to stand behind me. My father and Jason were backed into a corner. This time, they couldn't turn the tables. The day my father retired, the sky was strangely clear. I stood by my office window, looking down at the city stretching out beneath me. Sterling Enterprises still stood tall. But inside, the power had completely changed hands. My father was forced to leave. The board of directors, overwhelmed by the evidence and undeniable financial results I presented, had no choice but to persuade him to resign. Publicly, it was framed as a voluntary decision. But everyone knew the truth. I had removed him. Jason gave up as well. He tried to fight, clinging to the illusion of power that my father had promised him, but when every door slammed shut in his face, when he realized no one supported him anymore, he had no choice but to sell his shares and walk away from the company. A week later, I received an email from his lawyer. I want to sell all my shares, what's your offer? I smirked, glancing at the number he expected. I sent back an offer far lower than that. An hour later he accepted. He had no other choice. Jason disappeared from the business world after that. I heard he tried launching another startup, but no one wanted to invest in a failure. He was no longer my problem. The next step was the purge. Those loyal to my father and Jason had no place in this company. I called a full executive meeting, and within 2 weeks, I eliminated everyone who no longer belonged. Some protested, some begged for a second chance. I didn't waver. Sterling Enterprises needed a new machine. I hired visionaries, people who looked forward, not back. I rebuilt the board of directors with the sharpest minds in the industry. Within 6 months, the company ran smoother than ever before. When the next quarterly financial report was released, Sterling Enterprises surpassed $100 million in revenue. I stared at the number on my screen and allowed myself a small smile. This was just the beginning. 1 year after my father left the company, he asked to meet me. We had dinner at an upscale restaurant. No more power struggles. No more boardrooms. No more media scrutiny. Just 2 people. One man who had lost everything, and one woman who had taken back what was rightfully hers. My father looked so much older. The commanding presence he once carried, the one I had feared as a child, was gone. Now he was just an aging man, sitting across from me with a nearly empty glass of wine. He studied me for a long moment before speaking. I misjudged you. The words echoed in the quiet space. Once, I had longed my entire life to hear them. I had believed that if this day ever came, if my father finally acknowledged me, I would feel fulfilled. But now, sitting here, I realized I didn't need it anymore. I set down my glass, my expression calm. Yes, you did. No resentment, no triumph. Just a simple truth. He nodded slowly, as if accepting it. Do you regret it? I smirked, taking a sip of wine. We didn't say another word. I stepped out of the restaurant, onto the streets glowing with city lights. Looking up at the tallest building in the city, where Sterling Enterprises stood, I knew without a doubt. I had won. No one could take away what I had built. No one could ever see me as a temporary replacement again. I no longer had to prove myself to anyone. And that was my greatest victory. Rose Sterling's story is not just a battle for power in business. It reflects a harsh reality of life. Talent is not always recognized, especially when faced with family and societal bias. In many family businesses, the heir is not necessarily the most capable person, but the one chosen out of tradition. But Rose proved that power is not given, it is taken. True success comes from determination, strategy, and belief in one's own worth, even when facing opposition from those closest to you. What do you think about fairness in family and business? Do you believe Rose was right to fight for what she deserved? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more compelling stories about family and life. I used to believe that family was something unchangeable. That no matter what happened, no matter what I did, my parents would always be my parents, and home would always be home. But I was wrong. They showed me that sometimes, family isn't a place to return to. It's a place to leave. And for me, that moment came when I was 18. I am Olivia Carter, the second daughter in a family where discipline was everything. The house I grew up in wasn't a home, it was more like a military camp, where every action, every word had to follow strict rules. My father, Thomas Carter, was a university professor who took great pride in running our family with the same rigid discipline as one of his classrooms. Every evening at dinner he sat at the head of the table, controlling everything, from the way I sat to each bite of food I placed on my plate. Olivia, sit up straight, don't you see how sloppy you look? He would glare at me whenever I slouched even slightly. I would reluctantly adjust my posture, but the moment he looked away, I'd quietly relax my shoulders again. I never understood why keeping my back straight was so important, when all I wanted was to breathe freely for just a moment. My mother, Margaret Carter, wasn't as strict as my father, but she had her own way of making me feel like I was never good enough. She didn't need to yell. A single disappointed look from her was enough to make me feel like I had done something terribly wrong. And her favorite phrase was always, "What will people think of you?" It didn't matter what I did, and it certainly didn't matter if I was happy. What mattered to her was how our neighbors, my father's colleagues and their friends would perceive our family, and if I didn't fit into the perfect image they wanted to present, then it was my fault. In contrast, my older sister, Rebecca Carter, was their pride and joy. She was perfect by every standard they set, always excelling in school, always obedient, always ready to help whenever guests came over. Rebecca never defied our parents, never broke a single rule. I knew that in their eyes, I was nothing but a disappointment. A child who refused to obey, who didn't behave properly, who always fell short of their expectations. But I didn't care. I didn't want to be like Rebecca. I wanted a life of my own, a future I could shape instead of being forced into a mold I didn't belong in. And that's why, when I met Ethan, I didn't hesitate to throw myself into the relationship. He was 3 years older than me, a college student with messy hair and a defiant smile that challenged every rule. Ethan was everything my parents would despise. Reckless, rebellious, and completely indifferent to what people might think. I knew that if they found out they would never accept it, so I kept it a secret. My relationship with Ethan became my hidden refuge, a part of my life that my parents couldn't control. When I was with him, I wasn't the Carter family's rebellious daughter. I was just Olivia. A young woman who wanted to live life on her own terms. But I didn't know that this choice would lead me to the biggest turning point of my life. A turning point from which I could never turn back. I don't remember exactly when I first felt that something was wrong. Maybe it was the first time I woke up in the morning with nausea rising in my throat. Or maybe it was when I suddenly realized my jeans felt tighter, even though I hadn't changed my diet. But I didn't think too much about it. It's just stress, I told myself. Maybe it was the pressure of graduation exams, or the constant sneaking out to see Ethan without my parents finding out. But when it continued for weeks, a vague sense of fear began creeping into my mind. I needed to be sure. That afternoon, I slipped into a small pharmacy outside my neighborhood. My heart pounded as I walked up to the checkout counter, avoiding the cashier's gaze. I quickly stuffed the pregnancy test into my coat pocket and walked out as fast as I could. 10 minutes later, I was standing in the cramped bathroom of a gas station, gripping the test stick so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes for a moment, then looked down at the result. 2 lines. The world seemed to tilt. It felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling. I was pregnant. I didn't know how long I stood there, but when I finally stepped out of the restroom, my legs felt weak. The icy wind brushed against my face, but I couldn't feel anything anymore. Only one thought echoed in my mind. What am I going to do? Ethan. I had to tell Ethan. That night, I texted him to meet me at the park where we always went. When he saw me, Ethan smiled brightly, but it quickly faded when he noticed the tension in my face. What's wrong, Olivia? I clenched my hands together, trying to steady my voice. I'm pregnant? Silence wrapped around us. I could see every emotion flicker across his face. Shock, confusion, and then fear. Are you sure? He swallowed hard, his eyes locked onto mine. I nodded. Ethan took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair in frustration. We can't keep it, Olivia. His words cut through me like a cold, sharp blade. What? We're too young. I just started college and you haven't even graduated. If you keep the baby, it will ruin both of our futures. Our future. I let out a bitter laugh. Ethan, this isn't just about you. This is my baby too. He looked at me, and suddenly, his eyes felt distant. You need to get rid of it, Olivia. It's the only choice. I shook my head as tears burned down my cheeks. I couldn't believe that the person I trusted most could say something like that. If you don't, then don't expect me to take any responsibility. He stood up, shoving his hands into his pockets. I don't want to be involved in this. I watched his back as he walked away, each step crushing my heart beneath his feet. And that was when I realized I was completely alone. I waited a few days before telling my parents, even though I already knew how they would react. After dinner, while my father was reading the newspaper and my mother was tidying up the kitchen, I stood in the middle of the living room and took a deep breath. I have something to say. My father didn't look up, but I knew he heard me. What is it? I clenched my hands into fists. I'm pregnant. The spoon in my mother's hand fell to the floor, creating a sharp, piercing sound. My father slowly lowered his newspaper, his cold, razor-sharp gaze slicing through me. What did you just say? His voice was low, but dangerously firm. I'm pregnant, I repeated, even though my heart was pounding so hard I thought I might collapse right there. Who's the father? He growled. It doesn't matter, I whispered. My mother burst into tears, while my father shot up from his seat. You will get rid of it. His tone left no room for argument. We will find a discreet clinic. No one needs to know about this. I shook my head as tears welled up in my eyes. I can't. Olivia, you will. If I do, I might never be able to have children again. My voice cracked. That's what the doctor said. Silence stretched between us. And then, my father exhaled sharply, his eyes filled with nothing but contempt. Then leave this house. I froze. What? You are no longer my daughter. His voice was cold, unforgiving. I will not let you disgrace this family. Pack your things and go, now. My mother stood still. No objections, no pleading. Rebecca said nothing either. They had made their choice. And I knew from that moment on, I was no longer a part of this family. I stepped out into the night, carrying a small bag with a few clothes and a despair too deep to measure. The door slammed shut behind me with a final, resounding echo. A definitive end to everything I had once called home. I didn't know how long I walked, only that my feet kept moving forward, though I had no destination. I considered calling Ethan but quickly pushed the thought away. He had made his choice, and it was clear I wasn't part of it. I had no close friends to turn to either. My parents had always controlled my social circle, limiting it to people they deemed worthy of association. But then, one name came to mind. Aunt Helen. She was my mother's younger sister, the only person in the family who had ever shown me an ounce of kindness. As a child, I remembered her sneaking candy into my hands whenever I was punished for some trivial mistake. She once told me that I deserved to be loved in my own way, not the way my parents dictated. But because of her differences with my mother, she had moved to a small town in another state and rarely visited. With trembling fingers, I dialed her number. "Olivia?" Her voice came through, filled with concern. I broke down in tears. "Aunt Helen?" They threw me out. There was a brief silence on the other end before she spoke, without hesitation. "Where are you? I'm coming to get you." Aunt Helen lived in Asheville, a small town over 3 hours away from the place I once called home. Her house was modest but warm. Nothing like the cold, pristine perfection my parents had always maintained. When I stepped inside, she wrapped her arms around me. A simple gesture, but one I had never received from my own mother. "You're staying here," she said firmly, not giving me a chance to refuse. Aunt Helen wasn't wealthy, but she had saved up a decent amount after years of working as an accountant. When I told her I wanted to continue my education, she simply smiled. "I always knew you were a strong girl. I have some savings, and if you're willing to work hard, I'll help you." I could hardly believe it. After losing everything, someone was willing to help me stand up again. But I knew I couldn't rely solely on her kindness. So as soon as I settled into my new life in Asheville, I started looking for a job. After days of walking through town, filling out applications wherever I could, I finally got hired at a small cafe, where the owner, Miss Linda, seemed to sympathize when she noticed my growing belly. "I was a single mother once," she said, glancing at me. "I know what it's like. I'll give you a chance." I cried when I heard those words. The next few months were a true test. I spent my days attending classes at a local community college, worked evening shifts at the cafe, and by the time I got home, I was so exhausted that sometimes I barely made it to my bed before collapsing. But I never allowed myself to give up. Aunt Helen helped me apply for support programs for single mothers, making sure I saved every penny for my baby's future. Miss Linda occasionally let me take leftover food from the cafe, helping me stretch my savings even further. And then, the day arrived. After 12 hours of agonizing labor, I heard my son's first cry. Tears streamed down my face as the nurse placed the tiny baby in my arms. I looked down at his small, delicate face. Big, round eyes. A tiny mouth. Soft skin like an angel. In that moment, I knew nothing in this world mattered more than him. Aunt Helen stood beside my bed, her eyes glistening with tears. "Have you thought of a name?" she asked. I gazed at my son, my heart overflowing with love. "Noah," I whispered. "His name is Noah." Because Noah means peace, and after all the storms I had endured, I knew I had finally found mine. I never thought I would come this far. 4 years ago, I stood on my parents' doorstep with a small bag and not a single dollar in my pocket, cast out like a stranger. Now, I held a degree in business administration, with Noah, my son, being the greatest motivation that kept me going. Without Aunt Helen, I might never have made it to this day. She wasn't just the person who gave me a home. She was the one who made me believe I could do it. She paid for my first year of college, just enough to get me started. But the rest was up to me. I took on every job I could to make ends meet. Brewing coffee, waiting tables, cleaning floors. There were nights I was so exhausted that I fell asleep on my desk, but I never stopped. Because every morning, when Noah woke up and smiled brightly at me, I knew I couldn't stop. During my final year of college, I worked night shifts at a small diner called Rosie's, where the owner, Miss Linda, wasn't just my boss, she had become like a second aunt to me. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a tough exterior, but beneath it all, she was kind and understanding. One evening, after the dinner rush, as I was wiping down tables, Miss Linda walked over and placed an envelope on the table. "What's this?" I asked, confused. "A bonus," she smiled. "And an offer." I raised an eyebrow. "An offer?" Miss Linda folded her arms, her expression serious. "I'm retiring soon, Olivia. I need someone to take over this place and I think it should be you." I was stunned. "You're joking. You've worked here for 3 years, you know the customers, you understand how to manage the staff, and most importantly, you're responsible. You'd run this place better than anyone I could hire from the outside." I could hardly believe it. After years of struggling, I finally had a real chance to change my life. And I said yes. 3 years later, Rosie's became one of the most beloved diners in town. I had expanded the menu, upgraded the interior, but, most importantly, I kept its spirit alive. A cozy, welcoming place, where anyone could find a good meal and a warm smile. Noah was now 6 years old, a bright and energetic little boy with sparkling eyes. Every morning before I took him to school, he insisted on helping me arrange the tables at the diner, as if it were the most important job in the world. I never imagined my life could be this peaceful. Until I met Nathan Parker. Nathan walked into Rosie's on a crisp, autumn afternoon, holding the hand of a small blonde-haired boy. At first, I didn't pay much attention as the diner was busy. But when I brought their menus to the table, Noah suddenly exclaimed, "Owned. Mom, this is my friend from school." I looked down and realized that the little boy sitting across from me was Caleb, Noah's best friend. And the man sitting across from him, Nathan, was his father. Nathan had a gentle smile, but in his eyes there was something fleeting, a deep, quiet sorrow. "This little guy wouldn't stop talking about the grilled cheese here, so I had to bring him to try it," he chuckled, ruffling Caleb's hair. I laughed. "Well, let me get the best one for you both." And just like that, we started talking. I learned that Nathan was an engineer, a widower who had lost his wife 3 years ago, and had been raising Caleb on his own ever since. He learned that I was a single mother, that I had Noah, and soon enough, we became friends. But over time that friendship grew into something more. A year later, Nathan proposed to me. It wasn't some grand extravagant proposal with hundreds of roses or a fancy restaurant. It was just a quiet evening in my backyard, where the kids were playing on the grass, and he gently took my hand. "Olivia, you've been through so much pain in your life. I can't promise to make you forget the bad things, but I promise that the rest of your life will be filled with happiness." And I said yes. 2 years later, we welcomed our baby girl Sophia. I once thought I would always be alone, that my life was nothing but loss. But as I looked around the dinner table, Noah and Caleb laughing together, Nathan holding Sophia in his arms, I realized something. Family isn't about the people who gave birth to you. Family is about the ones who stay. One evening, like any other, I was folding laundry in the living room. Noah and Caleb were sitting on the floor, piecing together a puzzle, while Nathan rocked Sophia gently in his arms, humming a lullaby. A peaceful warmth filled our little home. Until a familiar voice echoed from the TV. "I believe in the values of family. I believe that a strong family is the foundation of a good society." My hands froze. I turned to the screen and my heart clenched. My father, Thomas Carter, stood on a podium, his expression serious but exuding confidence. Below him, a crowd clapped enthusiastically, and a news ticker scrolled across the screen. Professor Thomas Carter officially announces his candidacy for mayor. A surge of anger flared in my chest. That man, the one who had cast me out without hesitation, who had thrown me away to save his own reputation, was now standing there, preaching about family values. Nathan looked at me, noticing the shift in my expression. "Do you want me to turn it off?" I shook my head, my eyes still fixed on the screen. "No, I want to hear just how far his lies will go." My father continued his speech, speaking about responsibility, about sacrificing for your children, about the importance of building a united family. I let out a bitter laugh. He had never lived up to any of those words. And then, his next sentence made my blood run cold. "My wife Margaret and I are fortunate to have a small, happy family. Our daughter Rebecca is our greatest pride." Not a single word about me, not a single word about Noah. As if we had never existed. Nathan placed a hand on my shoulder and gave it a gentle squeeze. Olivia. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. He erased me. But I won't let him keep doing it. That night, after the kids had fallen asleep, Aunt Helen came over. When I told her what I had just seen on TV, she stayed silent for a long time. And then, with a deep sigh, her eyes filled with hesitation, she said, "There's something I've never told you." I frowned. "What is it?" Aunt Helen sat down across from me, a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. "Before your parents had Rebecca and you, they had another child." The room fell silent. I wasn't sure if I had misheard her. "What did you say?" Aunt Helen bit her lip as if battling an internal struggle. "Your parents once had a son, but he was born with a congenital disability. He had no legs." I froze. "What did they do to him?" Aunt Helen swallowed hard. "They left him at the hospital. Never came back." A surge of anger twisted inside me. I thought I had already known every terrible thing my parents were capable of, but it turned out I had barely scratched the surface. "So, is he alive? Did someone adopt him?" Aunt Helen nodded. "Yes, a wealthy family adopted him. They named him Ryan Evans. He's now a fairly well-known writer." Ryan Evans. A jolt ran through me. I had heard that name before. I had never read his books, but I had seen his name in articles, in interviews about resilience and overcoming adversity. And I had never known that he was my brother. Nathan placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder, his eyes full of support. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the framed picture of my little family. Noah, Caleb, Sophia. Then I looked at Nathan. "I'm going to find him. I wouldn't let another person be erased by my parents." It didn't take long to find Ryan Evans. He was a famous writer, and the internet was full of articles and information about him. But what shocked me the most was an upcoming event. A book signing and public Q&A session happening right in my hometown. I knew my parents would be there. As a mayoral candidate campaigning for office, my father wouldn't miss the chance to be seen at a major cultural event like this, where he could once again preach about family values in front of an audience. I knew this was the perfect moment. I reached out to the event organizers and sent a short email to Ryan through his personal website. I didn't expect an immediate response. Or any response at all. Unfortunately. But within a day, my phone rang. A deep, steady voice came through the line. "Olivia, this is Ryan." My breath caught in my throat. Hearing him say my name, in a voice both familiar and foreign, made me freeze for a moment. I had never had a brother. But somehow, deep down, I knew we had belonged to each other all along. I swallowed hard. "We need to meet." Over the next 3 days, I told Ryan everything. About our parents. About how they had abandoned him. Then later, abandoned me. About Noah. About how our father was standing on TV, preaching about family, while being the very man who had destroyed his own. Ryan didn't say much as I spoke. He just listened, his sharp, deep-set eyes absorbing every word. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. They forgot about me a long time ago, he said, his voice calm and steady. But they won't be able to forget about you. Then, he smiled. Come to my book signing, we'll finish this together. The day of the event, the grand hall of the city center was packed. Banners hung high, promoting Ryan's latest book, an inspiring story about resilience, about overcoming adversity. I stood at the back of the hall, scanning the crowd. And then, I saw them. My parents, Rebecca. They sat in the front row, my father with the perfect politician's smile, my mother in an elegant dress, Rebecca looking as flawless as ever. I wondered if she knew the truth about Ryan. But when I saw the indifference in her eyes, I realized that even if she did, she wouldn't care. Ryan stepped onto the stage to thunder's applause. He began speaking about his book, about his life, about being abandoned at birth, about growing up in another family, about how he had to fight to prove his worth. And then, he paused, his eyes sweeping across the audience. I've always wondered about my origins, he said, his voice warm yet heavy. I've always wondered why my birth parents abandoned me. And now, I finally have the answer. The room fell into a deep silence. Ryan turned his gaze to the front row. They're here today. All eyes shifted toward my parents. I saw the color drain from my father's face. My mother stiffen. Rebecca's eyes widen in shock. Ryan continued. My parents abandoned me because I wasn't perfect. They left me in a hospital the day I was born, afraid that my existence would tarnish their image. Whispers spread through the crowd. I saw journalists jotting down notes, cameras zooming in on my father, who was trying to maintain his composure, but his eyes betrayed his panic. Ryan took a deep breath. And then they did it again. He turned to me and gave a small nod. I knew it was my turn. I stood up and walked toward the stage. The murmurs grew louder. I looked straight at my parents. They threw me out of the house when I was 18. Pregnant. My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. They didn't want me to bring shame to the family. They forced me to get an abortion. When I refused, they abandoned me. Just like they abandoned Ryan. A heavy silence engulfed the room. And then, the outrage began. I heard gasps of shock, saw reporters scrambling to record every word. I looked at my father, the man who had prided himself on controlling everything. Now, he looked like a cornered animal. And I knew. He had lost. In the following days, the story spread like wildfire. Major newspapers picked it up. The public was furious, demanding my father withdraw from the election. 3 weeks later, he announced his withdrawal from the mayoral race. His political career crumbled. My parents left town shortly after, trying to escape the scrutiny of the public eye. Rebecca disappeared with them, leaving no trace behind. As for me, I stood among the family I chose, Nathan, Noah, Caleb, and Sophia, and I knew, finally, I had reclaimed everything they had once tried to take from me. This time, no one could erase me. After the scandal, my parents left the city. Rebecca vanished along with them, no explanation, no message. I wasn't surprised. She had always sided with them, even when the truth was undeniable. I thought I would never hear from them again. But then, one day, my phone rang. A known number. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. Olivia. I recognized the voice instantly. Jake. My breath caught in my chest. I hadn't thought about him in years. I no longer cared about the man who had abandoned me. But now, he was the one reaching out. I don't know if you want to hear me out. His voice was low and hesitant. But I need to talk to you. I frowned. We have nothing to talk about, Jake. Sarah and I. We can't have children. I tightened my grip on the phone but said nothing. She's tried everything. We've seen doctors, taken every test. And... He paused as if struggling to get the words out. She knows. I narrowed my eyes. Knows what? That you never had the abortion, that our child is alive. A chill ran through me. You kept the baby. Jake's voice broke slightly. And now, Noah is the only son I will ever have. My heart pounded. I knew exactly where he was trying to steer this conversation, but I let him say it himself. You think... maybe we could try again? Jake asked, his voice filled with hope. I made a mistake, Olivia. I abandoned you. I did the worst thing I could. But now I understand. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think that just because Sarah can't have kids, you can come back to me and Noah as if nothing ever happened? My voice was cold. I just want to be a father to him. I took a deep breath. Jake, you gave up that right a long time ago. Noah doesn't need you. He already has a wonderful father. I heard him sigh in frustration. Olivia... Goodbye, Jake, I said firmly, and hung up. I didn't need anything from him anymore. A few days later, another phone call came, but this time, the voice was unfamiliar. Hello, Olivia, my name is Martha Parker, I'm Jake's mother. I froze. I know this may seem sudden, but I just found out the truth. Her voice trembled. Jake and your parents lied to us. They told us you had an abortion, that our grandson never existed. I closed my eyes, so they hadn't just erased Noah from the public, they had erased him from his own grandparents. What do you want? I asked, my voice emotionless. We just want to meet him. She choked back tears. If you'll allow us. I was silent for a long time. I had never considered the idea that Noah had paternal grandparents. I had never thought they might want to know him. But they weren't Jake. They weren't my parents. And Noah had a right to know. I'll talk to my son, I said. If he agrees, we can arrange a meeting. Martha broke down in tears. Thank you, Olivia, thank you so much. Noah sat on his bed, his legs swinging as he listened to me. So I have another grandma and grandpa? He asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. I nodded. They want to meet you, but it's your choice, Noah. If you don't want to, I won't make you. He thought about it for a moment, then smiled. I want to meet them. The next day, Nathan and I took Noah to meet his grandparents for the first time. Martha burst into tears the moment she saw him, while George, a silver-haired but dignified man, took a long moment before he could speak. He looks just like Jake when he was little, he whispered, his eyes glistening. Noah studied them for a moment before stepping forward and extending his hand. It's nice to meet you. And just like that, a part of my past, a part I thought would never be repaired, found its way back. My life was no longer haunted by those who abandoned me. My parents, Rebecca, Jake. They had chosen their path. And I had chosen mine. I had a family I loved, a husband who stood by me, children I cherished more than anything in this world. I no longer looked at my past with pain or resentment. I looked forward, and I knew finally I had found true happiness. The story of Olivia Carter is not just about breaking free from a toxic family, but a testament to the power of resilience and determination. She was rejected, abandoned, but instead of letting her past define her, she built a better future for herself. This story reminds us that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who love and accept us unconditionally. In the end, what matters most isn't seeking validation from those who left us, but creating our own happiness. What do you think about Olivia's choices? About those who abandoned her and those who stayed? Share your thoughts. And don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about life and family. I never thought I'd return to my old house, let alone live there again. But life doesn't care about your plans. Just 1 week after graduating, I watched my dream of independence fall apart faster than it took me to receive my diploma. It wasn't because I was unemployed or lacked skills. Some things you just can't predict, like how my parents turned a temporary stay into a sweet trap, wrapped in sacrifice and family obligation. The longer I lived there, the more I realized. Sometimes, the person who manipulates you best shares your last name. I'm Sarah, 23 years old. a fresh graduate with a bachelor's in business administration from the University of Michigan. After graduation, I came back home to Ann Arbor, planning to stay for about 3 months to save on rent, before moving out once I was financially stable. And at first, everything seemed reasonable. Just a week later, I landed a job at a local marketing company called Lexington & Co. with a starting salary of $48,000 a year. Not bad for someone fresh out of college, especially with performance bonuses. I remember that first night after signing the contract. My mom made my favorite casserole, and my dad popped open a cheap bottle of red wine to celebrate. I even said, excitedly, "I'll just stay for around 3 months, save a little, then I'll move into my own place. Definitely before winter." The room fell noticeably quiet. The clinking of silverware stopped mid-air. My mom put her knife down and gave me that look I knew too well. The look of, "Get ready to hear something you don't want to." "Sarah," my mom said, her voice annoyingly sweet. "You know my back's been awful lately, I can only work part-time at the library. And your dad?" She glanced at him. "Things at the factory aren't stable either. I heard they're planning more layoffs." My dad gave a slight cough and chimed in. "She's right, the economy's rough these days, we really need your help with the bills at least for now. Your mom's got a point. Staying here rent-free, helping out the family, isn't that more practical?" I looked down at my now cold casserole. Something tightened in my chest. A mix of guilt, anger, and feeling stuck. I couldn't say no, they were my parents. And I didn't have a solid plan for moving out yet. I nodded and forced a smile. "Then I'll stay, a little longer." From that day on, life settled into a quiet, steady routine. I worked 8 to 5, came home, and most of my paycheck went straight into covering bills. Electricity, water, internet, gas, even groceries if mom said her back hurt too much to shop. Each month, I automatically transferred more than half my salary into a shared account my mom set up to manage the family's finances. I didn't complain. At least not in the beginning. Mom always had dinner ready, the house was clean, and everything seemed orderly. I kept telling myself this was temporary, that I was doing the right thing. But slowly, I started noticing something odd. Every time I brought up moving out, both my mom and dad would either dodge the topic or guilt-trip me. One time, I casually mentioned checking out a small apartment near downtown, and my mom sighed and muttered, "I wonder who'll help me pay next month's bills if you leave." And just like that, I became the financial backbone of the house without even realizing it. I didn't go out, didn't splurge, just tried to save. But every month, looking at my account felt like someone was quietly draining my wallet. I was a hard-working, independent, goal-driven young woman. And yet, at 23, I still slept in my childhood bedroom and avoided booking a session with a financial advisor because I was scared to admit I didn't have enough money. Worst of all, my parents didn't see any problem with it. To them, I was the convenient child. No demands, no complaints, no trouble, unlike others. I didn't yet know how that other person would come into the story. But I knew one thing, that fake peace wasn't going to last long. I still remember the day everything snapped back into the familiar order of my family. The day my sister, Rebecca, suddenly showed up after more than a year of radio silence. The door barely opened before my mom flew out like a gust of wind, her voice sky-high with excitement. "Oh my God, Rebecca, my baby!" My mom hugged her like she'd never let go, eyes sparkling like she'd just met a Hollywood star. My dad wasn't far behind, dragging in her suitcase and asking eagerly, "Was traffic bad? Where are Daniel and the kids? They're probably out in the car, right?" I stood on the staircase, watching it all without saying a word. They didn't see me. Or more accurately, didn't bother to notice I was there. Rebecca, 31, had everything my parents idolized: a model family with a software engineer husband, 2 doll-like kids, and a suburban life in Chicago that my mom often gushed about with thinly veiled envy. "We're just staying a few days, figured the kids could visit Grandma and Grandpa." She beamed like the world revolved around her family. My mom sighed lovingly. "Oh my God, you really are the most thoughtful child. So considerate, so responsible, so maternal. Unlike some people who only know how to bury themselves in work. That last part, of course, didn't need a name. I swallowed the lump in my throat and turned back to my room. The atmosphere in the house changed instantly after Rebecca and the kids arrived. Every meal revolved around what she liked to eat, whether the kids could eat it, whether Daniel got his nap, and a million little details my parents treated like national news. My sister talked about how Lucas, her 5-year-old son, could now write letters with crayons, and the whole family applauded like it was a groundbreaking discovery. I once earned a full-ride honors scholarship to college, but when I brought the confirmation letter home, my mom just glanced at it and said flatly, "Good, at least it saves the family some money." I never forgot that feeling. Every time I tried to prove my worth, all I got were indifferent looks. Rebecca, on the other hand, just had to frown and someone would catch her. I used to think I just wasn't good enough. Back in high school, I studied like someone possessed, because I knew if I didn't earn a scholarship, I wouldn't be able to go to college. While my sister went to private school, had tutors, expensive SAT prep, I had a wobbly wooden desk, library books, and sheer stubborn determination. I remember once, I won first place in the statewide debate competition and brought home a shiny gold medal. I was so excited, thinking this time they'd be proud. But when I walked into the kitchen, my parents were chatting about how Rebecca had been chosen as the lead for her postnatal yoga class. My mom glanced at the medal, then turned back and said, "Rebecca's always had leadership skills. That girl was born to shine." I wanted to scream, to smash that stupid medal right there on the dining table. But instead, I just stood there, silent, like some forgotten piece of furniture. Rebecca stayed with us for 3 days this week. During those 3 days, I was nothing more than a ghost, drifting through my own home. In the mornings, I dodged the cheerful laughter in the living room. At night, I ate alone in the kitchen, while the rest of the family gathered around to rewatch videos of Lucas counting to 10. I wasn't surprised anymore, just tired. My mom no longer asked how work was. My dad stopped discussing household matters with me. Every decision was now consulted with Rebecca, the person who had been back for less than 72 hours. I tried texting Mom. "Mom, I'm thinking of applying to rent an apartment near work. Do you think that's okay?" She read the message, but didn't reply. 3 hours later, I heard her cheerful voice from the living room. "Rebecca, why don't you stay a few more days? It's been so lovely having the whole family together." I bit my lip, turned back to my room, and slammed the door shut. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was living in a play where I'd never been given any lines. I didn't know what more I had to do to make them see me as a person, not a money machine, not a shadow behind their golden child spotlight. But I knew one thing: every bottled-up rage has an expiration date, and mine was getting close. I was washing dishes after dinner when Mom's phone rang on the kitchen table. She had the speaker on. As soon as she saw Rebecca's name, she hit answer like it was a call from the White House. "Rebecca, what's wrong, honey?" I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but my sister's sobs echoed loud and clear from the phone on the table. "Mom, Mike got laid off. They shut down the company, no warning. We don't have enough for rent this month. We don't know where to go." Mom immediately jumped up, her voice full of panic and worry. "Oh my God, how could this happen? No, Rebecca, calm down. Come home. There's always room for you here." My heart dropped to the floor. I wiped my hands, stepped out of the kitchen, trying to stay calm. If she and her family move in, then I'll start looking for a place of my own, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Mom turned to me, her face shifting from concern to cold in an instant. "What did you just say? Sarah, how can you be so selfish?" Dad walked in just then, catching the last part. He nodded sternly, like I had just dishonored 3 generations of ancestors. "Rebecca is going through the hardest time of her life. As her sister, you should support her. This is everyone's home, not just yours." "But this house only has 3 bedrooms, I argued. "If they move in, where is everyone supposed to sleep?" My mom lowered her voice, trying to sweet-talk me in that way that always gave me chills. The kids need space to play, and Rebecca and Mike need a proper bed. Your room is the biggest, so it makes the most sense for the kids. As for you, you can move into the old storage room. I'll help you tidy it up. It's just temporary. I stood there, frozen. That storage room was so cramped you could barely turn around, let alone live in it. But the intensity of my parents' reaction made it clear. My opinion had never been something worth considering. And sure enough, that's how it went. That weekend, Rebecca, Mike, Lucas and Lily officially moved in. 3 SUVs packed with luggage blocked the driveway. While I was carrying boxes of my belongings into the tiny storage room, my parents were busy taking photos of the big family reunion, looking like they were hosting a summer festival. My room, the one I used to call my only remaining personal space, became the kids' playroom. They repainted the walls pastel blue, hung cartoon posters, and casually installed a baby monitor camera. And me? I was shoved into a tiny, leaky room with no windows, just big enough for a twin bed and an old desk from middle school. No closet. I had to use cardboard boxes to store my clothes. The first day after my sister's family had fully settled in, I came home from work and saw Rebecca lounging on the couch watching Netflix, feet up on the coffee table. Lily was tearing apart one of my file folders like a toy, and Lucas was messing with the printer in my workspace. Sorry, my storage room. Lucas, get out of there right now, I shouted, rushing in. Rebecca looked up from the screen, indifferent. I told him he could just play for a bit. What's the big deal? He's a kid. I didn't respond. I picked up the folder, important documents I'd prepared for a big project next week, now scribbled all over with highlighter. That night I planned to bring it up during dinner, but before I could open my mouth, my mom spoke first. Sarah, make sure you stay home tomorrow to help your sister. Mike has a job interview, and Rebecca has a dentist appointment. I stared at her. You mean, skip work to babysit? It's not that big of a deal, my dad chimed in. Just one day. Everyone in the family has to make sacrifices. I almost threw my fork at the table. I'm not a nanny, I work too. I'm exhausted too. Why does everyone just assume I'm the one who has to carry everything? Rebecca smirked. You're always so emotional. Maybe you should learn to control your feelings if you ever want to be a mother. That comment hit me like a slap in the face. I stood up and left the table, ignoring my dad's disappointed look and my mom's dramatic sigh. That night, I sat curled up in the tiny room, the dim yellow light making everything feel even more suffocating. I stared at the old suitcase in the corner. For the first time in months, I seriously thought, maybe it's time to pack everything and disappear. I got the utility bill on a Tuesday night. Holding that flimsy piece of paper in my hand, I stood frozen in the kitchen. The number in the bottom right corner nearly took my breath away. Almost double last month's. I glanced toward the living room, where my mom was doing puzzles with Lily and Lucas was watching cartoons on the TV that stayed on from morning till night. The lights in the house were never off for more than 3 minutes. The rice cooker, washer, oven, heater, everything running full blast like we were feeding an army. Which, I guess, we kind of were. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lying in the cramped room with streetlights seeping in through the door crack, I tried to calculate every dollar in my head. My salary hadn't changed, but the expenses had skyrocketed, like someone had opened the faucet and let it pour unchecked. The next morning, I got up early, made breakfast, poured coffee, and waited for everyone to sit down. Once they were settled around the table, I took a deep breath and said, "We need to talk about the electricity, water, and other living expenses. Has anyone noticed the bill this month nearly doubled?" The table fell silent for a few seconds, then Rebecca gave a little laugh. "Oh, Sarah, you're so uptight. That's totally normal when there are more people in the house. Kids use more water, the washing machine's going non-stop. You can't expect costs to stay the same, right?" "No," I said firmly. "But I also can't keep paying for everything by myself. I only plan to stay here for 3 months to save money, not to support a 5-person household. My mom sighed and put her spoon down, like I had just declared I was dropping out of college to join a cult. What do you mean by that? The family's going through a tough time. You should feel proud to be able to help. Mom, I've covered most of the bills for nearly a year, and now I'm expected to pay for utilities used by 5 other people? I could feel the heat rising in my face. Has anyone even asked me if I can afford it? Has anyone offered to share the cost? My dad frowned, voice cold as steel. Sarah, families are supposed to support each other, not nickel and dime like strangers. You're being very selfish. Rebecca crossed her arms, her eyes full of judgment. You're working and have income. Mike and I just lost our main source of income and have 2 kids to care for. Can't you be a little more compassionate? I let out a bitter laugh. Soft-hearted? I'd been soft-hearted all year, and what did I get in return? Disrespect and the assumption that I'd carry everything on my own. No one said a word. I stood up, leaving my untouched toast behind, feeling like I'd just run a mental marathon. The weekend hit like a slap in the face. On Friday, just as I stepped through the door after a long day at work, Rebecca was already waiting, purse in hand. Thank goodness you're back. Mike and I have plans to meet friends in Grand Rapids. We'll be back Sunday night, okay? The kids' dinner is prepped, and the rest, you know the drill. My eyes widened. You mean, I'm watching the kids by myself the whole weekend? You say that like it's something new, she shrugged. You do it every weekend anyway. You've never once asked me, I said through gritted teeth. You and Mike just leave, and I'm expected to sacrifice my time, energy, and sanity just because I'm the more available one? Rebecca sighed, acting patient. You're overreacting again? We're family. We help each other in hard times. My mom poked her head out from the kitchen. Sarah, please don't cause tension. Rebecca and Mike are trying to get their lives back on track. This is the time you should be supporting them. I looked around. No one said a word. No one stood up for me. Once again, I was the difficult one, for simply not wanting to be a servant in my own home. That night I lay in my room, listening to Lily scream because she lost her cartoon channel, while Lucas banged toys against the wall. I was overwhelmed by responsibilities that weren't mine, and the deafening silence from those who should have understood me the most. I realized I was slowly losing myself. And more I understood one thing: there are limits to how much someone can endure for the sake of family. And I was almost at mine. I had just folded the last thick sweater when loud knocks hit the door. Before I could respond, Rebecca barged in. Her face was tight with annoyance, arms crossed. What are you doing? I glanced at the duffel bag by the bed and answered calmly. I'm packing. I'm going skiing with some coworkers tomorrow. We're heading to Crystal Mountain, just for the weekend. Rebecca froze for a second, then her voice shot up. What? You're leaving? What about Lucas and Lily? I looked her straight in the eyes. They're your kids, not mine. I don't owe you any weekends, especially not after months of babysitting without you asking once. You can't go, Rebecca almost screamed. Mike and I have plans to attend Aunt Linda's birthday in Grand Haven. Mom and Dad are going too. You're the only one who can stay with the kids. I raised my eyebrow, voice icy. Oh, so the whole family made plans without bothering to tell me. Good to know. Rebecca stormed out, shouting down the hallway. Mom, Dad, Mike, you need to hear what Sarah is saying. Less than 2 minutes later, all 4 of them crowded into my tiny room. Dad leaned against the doorframe, Mom crossed her arms like she was about to call a family meeting. And Mike stood there, with his usual blank stare. Mom spoke first, voice stern. Sarah, I heard you're planning to go away this weekend? That's right, I said flatly. But the whole family agreed you'd stay and watch the kids, Mom snapped, her face flushed with anger. You can't change your mind at the last minute like this. Agreed? I repeated. Who exactly agreed, because I sure wasn't invited to that conversation. We all thought it was the most reasonable plan, Dad added, his tone like a judge delivering a sentence. Rebecca and Mike have important things to do, and you're just going for fun." I squinted, feeling heat rise in my chest. There it is again. I'm always the one expected to sacrifice. My weekends don't matter, my feelings are invisible, and the responsibility always lands on me. I've babysat, paid most of the bills, lived in a cramped room, and endured all of this without a single thank you. And the one time I take a break, the whole house acts like I've committed treason? Rebecca shrieked, her voice sharp. "You're so selfish, you never think about anyone else, just yourself. No wonder you're still single." I looked up, eyes like blades. "And I'm not surprised you keep dodging the responsibilities of being a mother while expecting the whole world to cater to you." My mom slammed her hand against the doorframe. "If you walk out of this house tomorrow, don't bother coming back." I stood still for a few seconds. Then I laughed. For the first time in months, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was time. "Thank you, Mom. I've been waiting a long time to hear that." I rolled my suitcase out of the room, walking past 4 stunned faces. At the front door, I turned back. "Oh, and by the way, starting this month I won't be paying any more bills. I don't live here anymore, and I have no financial obligation to any of you. Good luck with the electricity, water, internet, and groceries." "Sarah!" My mom shrieked, her voice panicked. "You're joking, right?" "No, Mom, this time, I've never been more serious." I pulled out my phone and called Ashley, my best friend from work. "Hey Ash, is that room at your place still available?" "Of course," she said cheerfully. "Want to come over now?" "I'll be there in 30 minutes. I hung up, opened the door, and walked out, leaving behind the shouting, the anger, and the panic that I no longer felt guilty about. Driving to Ashley's house, I felt a strange sense of relief. Like for the first time in my life, I was allowed to exhale without being interrupted. The next day I stood in the snow at Crystal Mountain, my cheeks red from the cold, a hot cup of cocoa in my hands, and the sound of my friends laughing around me. No screaming kids. No forced responsibilities. No coldness disguised as love. And most importantly, no one treating me like I was just extra baggage. I arrived at Ashley's place just before midnight, exhausted but oddly at peace. She opened the door with a big hug and the only words I needed to hear. "I'm so glad you got out." I set my suitcase down and exhaled like I'd just escaped a toxic cloud. No more yelling, no more condescending looks, no more words that made me feel like a terrible person just because I dared to live for myself. Ashley let me stay in the small guest room with a folding bed. It was better than any room I'd ever had at my parents' house. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight pouring through the curtains. Silence. No kids screaming. No cartoon TV blaring since 6 a.m. I made coffee, took a sip while it was still hot, and for the first time in months, I didn't have to chase after children to turn off the faucet or scrub marker drawings off the wall. I didn't respond to any texts or calls for the next 2 days. My phone buzzed constantly. Mom, Rebecca, Dad, even Mike called. Every time, I just glanced at the screen and ignored it. I didn't need to hear another round of guilt, tears, or blame. I'd had enough of that my whole life. On Sunday night, I finally opened my phone to check the messages. Not because I felt guilty. Just because I wanted to see how far they'd take their victim narrative. "Sarah, how long do you plan to keep this up?" Aunt Linda asked all through the party why Rebecca wasn't there. I had to lie to save face. "Rebecca, I can't believe how ungrateful you are. Mike and I trusted you, the kids did too. Now Lily won't stop crying for Auntie Sarah. Hope you're proud of hurting a 5-year-old. Dad, your mom's been a wreck all day. If you treat your own family like this, who will you have in your life later on?" I read each message, feeling nothing but tired. No apologies, no recognition that I'd been drained dry. Just blame, guilt-tripping, and expectations Xing same as always. I opened a new message. Not to send, just to let it out. I didn't walk away. I just stopped letting people use me. I didn't leave my family. I left the people who never treated me like I was part of it. From now on, I'm living for myself. I deleted it, then blocked them all. Mom, Dad, Rebecca, Mike. Then I blocked them on social media. Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn. I didn't need them watching me anymore, and I definitely didn't want to see them. 3 days later, I started apartment hunting. With my salary no longer drained by shared expenses, I could finally afford a small but cozy place, quiet, and full of light. The apartment I chose was on the east side of town, just a 15-minute drive from work. It had a balcony, some greenery, and most importantly, no one in my family knew the address. On move-in day, I only brought the essentials: clothes, my laptop, a few personal items, and a handful of my favorite books. I left everything else behind, both literally and figuratively. I installed the curtains myself, put up the bookshelf, and hung a few small paintings. That first night in my new apartment, I lay on a brand new mattress, looked up at the ceiling, and told myself, I did it. I got out. No one knocked on my door asking me to cook, no crying, no criticism. Just the soft sound of jazz from Spotify and the wind rustling through the window. I didn't tell anyone back home where I lived, and I had no plans to go back. Even though my mom once warned me that if I left I should never come back to this house, I now felt fine with that, maybe even grateful. That house was never a place I truly belonged. Now I was building one of my own, a real home. Every time a text came from an unknown number, my heart would still skip a beat for a second. But then I'd exhale when it turned out to be just a promo, or a message from a friend. My family slowly faded from my screen, and from my mind. I knew they wouldn't let go easily. There'd be attempts to pull me back, pleas, blame, even tears. But this time, I was ready. Because now, I was no longer the Sarah who just endured. I was Sarah, the one who dared to stand up, walk away, and live her own life. That first week in my new apartment felt like a waking dream. Every morning, I woke up to birdsong instead of screaming children. No one pounded on my door asking me to come watch the kids. No one gave orders, made snide remarks, or criticized me. I made coffee, sat on the balcony, watched sunlight spill over the trees, and for the first time I felt true peace. The apartment is small, but every corner has my imprint. Olive green walls I chose myself. A desk placed by the window for natural light. A beanbag I can sink into for hours with a book. And the fridge, stocked only with food I like, not snacks for the kids or my sister's pointless diet meals. I had truly cut ties. Not just blocking my parents' Rebecca and Mike's numbers. I deleted them from my contacts, and blocked them on every social platform. No more of Mom's vague, guilt-baiting Facebook posts. No more fake family reunion stories. No more midnight messages from Rebecca asking if I'd changed my mind. No. I've had enough time to think, 23 years of it. And now, it's time I live for myself. Every evening after work, I came home, lit a scented candle, played soft jazz, and either read a book or video called Ashley, my best friend who took me in when I had nowhere else to go. Some nights I just sat there in silence, doing nothing. But that silence no longer felt heavy. It was the kind I used to crave back in that old house. A place full of noise, yet no one truly heard me. I began to feel like I was reclaiming the parts of myself that had been stolen. Every meal I cooked, every bill I paid, every decision I made without asking for permission, reminded me, this is the life I deserve to live. But my family didn't give up easily. Each week, strange numbers still called. A few times, I answered, only to hear my mother's breathless voice on the other end. Sarah, are you really cutting us off? You're my daughter. I responded with just one sentence. If you truly saw me as your daughter, I would have been treated differently. Then I hung up. Another time, I got a handwritten letter, old school style. Rebecca's handwriting. 2 pages full of guilt-tripping and fake tears. She wrote about how much Lily missed me, how Lucas kept asking, "Where did Auntie Sarah go?" and how Mike was stressed about money. I read the whole thing, then folded it neatly and dropped it in the trash without hesitation. I don't hate them, but I no longer allow them to control my life. One Saturday afternoon, I sat down with a new notebook and wrote a few lines. It wasn't a diary, more like a declaration. I will only allow people who respect me to exist in my life. Friends, coworkers, or family. If they don't understand boundaries, they don't belong in my journey. I've been called selfish, ungrateful, a traitor. But one thing I know for sure. No one has the right to demand I sacrifice myself for their selfishness and still expect me to be thankful. If one day my mother or my family realizes that love doesn't come with manipulation, that helping doesn't mean exploiting, that blood ties are not an excuse to mistreat someone, then maybe I'll speak. But only when they're ready to listen to me as an adult. Not as a daughter expected to sacrifice in silence. For now, I choose silence, independence, and the freedom I claimed, not through tears, but with courage. That night, I sat on my balcony, wrapped in a blanket, holding a warm cup of tea. Streetlights reflected off the window, soft music in my ears, and the smell of waffles from the restaurant next door filled the air. I smiled to myself. Not because I had won, but because I had finally quit a game I should have never been forced to play. Sarah's story is a powerful reminder that family is no excuse for manipulation or exploitation. No matter the label of family, if there's no respect for boundaries or individual worth, the relationship can drain you until you lose yourself. Sarah found the courage to walk away from the cycle of unconditional sacrifice and chose freedom and self-respect instead of silent suffering. Sometimes, loving yourself is the only way to truly live and begin again. What do you think about Sarah's choice? Was she being too harsh, or was it exactly what she needed to protect herself? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional real-life stories and deep lessons on family. That day, when the phone rang for the third time, I was kneeling in the garden, hands covered in dirt, trying to finish planting the lavender bushes I swore had come back to life 3 times just to bloom in time for summer. But I didn't expect that the final drop of sweat I shed that day would be for someone who had just passed away. One phone call, and the entire world I knew collapsed. The only thing I could hear was a stranger's voice, but it carried the weight of a hammer crashing into my heart. "Miss Clara Winters, this is Nathan Bell, attorney for Miss Diane Harper." And then he said the sentence I knew I'd never forget for the rest of my life. "I'm sorry to inform you your aunt passed away last night." I felt the ground sink beneath my feet. My body was still in the backyard, but my soul, I wasn't sure if it managed to stay. I don't remember how I got inside. My trembling hands clutched the phone like if I let go, I'd crumble into dust. Nathan Bell, a name I'd never heard before but that now rang like a funeral bell, was still speaking on the other end, his voice strangely calm, a stark contrast to the chaos inside me. "Aunt Diane passed in her sleep, very peacefully," he said, as if that would somehow ease the pain. "She left specific instructions for me to contact you before anyone else in the family, and—" He hesitated. "There's a letter meant only for you. It must be read before the funeral." I bit my lip. A letter? Before the funeral? What the hell was going on? Aunt Diane wasn't just an aunt. She was the only one in the family who ever saw me as a real person. The first to teach me how to spell using sticky notes all over the kitchen walls. The one who used to slip caramel candies into my hand whenever I had to endure those cold, meaningless family gatherings. The one who once told me, "Clara, the world will try to mold you into whatever it wants. But you have to be the one holding the mold." And now, she was gone, suddenly, without a goodbye. I sank into the kitchen chair, my heart throbbing like someone had stabbed it with an invisible knife. "Miss Clara?" Nathan spoke up after a stretch of silence. "Yes, I'm here." I need to ask, would you be able to come to my office today? As soon as possible. Yes. I'll be there within an hour. I don't know what made me say that, like I was accepting an invitation to tea instead of preparing to walk into a storm. Attorney Bell's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building overlooking downtown Portland. I had never stepped into a place that made me feel so out of my league. Velvet thick carpets, leather chairs softer than my bed, and abstract paintings on the wall that I couldn't figure out where to look. Nathan Bell stood as I walked in. He looked to be in his 50s, salt and pepper hair, impeccably dressed down to the cufflinks. His face showed experience, but also elegance. The kind of man who could kill a deal with a glance and still make the other side feel honored. "Thank you for coming so quickly," he said, shaking my hand, voice gentle. "I didn't want to delay anything related to my aunt," I replied, trying to steady my voice. "You said she left a letter for me?" Nathan nodded, pulling 2 envelopes from the drawer of a glossy walnut desk. One was large, with the Bell and Lowry law firm's logo. The other was smaller, ivory-colored, with my name written in the familiar handwriting, elegant, delicate and proud, of Diane Harper. I reached for the envelope, the faint scent of jasmine and sandalwood still lingering on the paper. My heart tightened. She always wore that perfume. It was the last trace of her, a whisper from the past. "She asked that you read this letter privately first, then we'll discuss everything else." I nodded, hands trembling slightly as I opened the envelope. Inside was a thick, small sheet of paper with carefully written lines. "My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, it means I've completely run out of time in this life. But don't be sad. I lived without regrets, exactly the way I chose. But I need to ask one final thing of you. It won't be easy, but no one else can do it but you. At my funeral, you will have to read a letter that will change everything. Forever." The letter is hidden in the secret compartment of the mahogany jewelry box, the one I once showed you how to open when you were 13, remember? The one your mother despised for being too flashy. Some may see this as revenge, but I call it justice, late, but necessary. I'm leaving everything to you, Clara, the estate, the shares, the house, but it only takes effect if you fulfill one condition. Read that letter. In front of the entire family, no exceptions. I believe in you. Because you are the only one in that family who knows right from wrong. The only one not swallowed by greed. Oh, Diane. Peace. Don't let them bury me in a floral dress. I've said it before, flowers belong in gardens, not coffins. I read the letter over and over, 3 times, my throat tightening. "She left everything to me?" I stammered, looking at Nathan. "Yes," he nodded. "The total estate is estimated at around $64 million, including shares in Harper Innovations, real estate, investment accounts, and valuable artworks. And my family? There are a few small gifts noted, but the majority of the estate will go to you, if, and only if, you agree to carry out her request." I sat silently in the leather chair, those numbers echoing in my head like tolling bells. $64 million. My family is going to lose their minds. But what suffocated me wasn't the money, it was the unanswered question. What had my aunt been hiding all these years? And why did she choose me, the one almost always seen as the outsider, to reveal it to the world? The house sat at the end of a tree-lined road, roof dark with moss, off-white walls stained with time. Still proud, like the way Aunt Diane had always existed in a family full of pretense. I hadn't been back here in nearly a year. But now, every brick, every crack in the door seemed to whisper my name. I stepped out of the car, clutching my purse. Inside was Aunt Diane's first letter, and a clear address for what I needed to find. The secret compartment in the mahogany jewelry box, the one that used to make my mother frown because it was too gaudy. The iron gate creaked as I pushed it open. Even the sound of metal echoing in the garden made my skin crawl. The house was completely still, not a sound. The old housekeeper, Mrs. Kelly, had likely left after handling the initial funeral arrangements. I had my own key, one Aunt Diane gave me on my 21st birthday, along with a line I could never tell if she meant as a joke or not, in case someone decides to change the locks without asking. I opened the door. The scent of old wood and faint jasmine still lingered somewhere. I didn't turn on the lights. The sunset filtered through stained glass panels, enough to guide me to the second floor, where her bedroom sat at the end of a thick carpeted hallway. That room hadn't changed. Deep blue silk curtains, a slightly crooked picture frame that looked intentional, and right in the center of the vanity was the mahogany jewelry box. I'd touched it hundreds of times as a child, but only once did she show me how to open the secret compartment. I sat down on the velvet chair. My heart pounded like it wanted to burst out of my chest. My fingers traced the intricate rose carvings on the wood. The third petal from the left. That was the secret. I pressed it. A soft click sounded. A small tray slid out from the bottom of the box, revealing a thick, heavy, dark yellow envelope. On it, Aunt Diane's unmistakable handwriting. To be opened at the funeral, in front of the entire family. I took a deep breath and carefully placed the letter into my purse. Beneath the thick paper was something hard and sharp-edged? Maybe a photo. Maybe documents. Maybe something that could shatter a family. The next 3 days were a blur of chaos. My phone rang non-stop. Relatives, who never even remembered where I lived, suddenly started calling, asking questions, fishing for hints, as if they sensed they'd just lost a fortune they never got their hands on. I stayed completely silent. Not a word, not a hint. On the morning of the funeral, I wore a tailored black suit. No lace, no frills, no tears. I pinned a lavender flower brooch to my lapel, the only flower Aunt Diane liked besides jasmine. When I walked into St. Augustine's Church, dozens of eyes turned to me like needles. My father, Douglas Winters, stood at the front row, trying to hide his tension behind a forced smile. Beside him was Aunt Heather, Diane's sister, with a face as cold as wax. I knew they weren't there out of grief, they were there to wait for the will. And I was the knot in their plan. Nathan Bell approached me once everyone was seated. He whispered, "It's time, Clara." She wanted the letter read right after the priest's speech, before anyone can leave. I nodded. The letter in my bag felt like it weighed 100 pounds, as if it contained an explosion waiting to go off. The funeral proceeded with solemn formality. No one dared wear bright colors. Aunt Diane had been clear. If anyone wears beige or pale yellow, I'll haunt them for life. The flowers surrounding the casket were all white jasmine and purple lavender. A longtime friend of hers spoke, sharing stories about the creative projects she once led at Harper Innovations, the company she founded over 30 years ago. Then the priest invited me to speak. The church was dead silent as I stepped up to the wooden podium. The sound of my heels echoed like a metronome of fate. I pulled out the letter, breaking the red wax seal with Aunt Diane's signature mark. A stylized jasmine flower. No one said a word, but I could feel the eyes on me. Expectant, suspicious, fearful. I looked across the room before speaking, clearly. "My name is Clara Winters. My Aunt Harper requested that I read this letter at her funeral, in front of the entire family, and I will do exactly that." I opened the letter. Every word felt like it burned into my palms. "Dearest Clara, if you're standing at that podium, it means you've found the courage. And I believe courage is the only thing strong enough to face the lies that have gone on far too long in our family. You're holding in your hands a letter of truth. The truth I've buried for nearly 40 years. Not out of fear, but because I was waiting for the right person to tell it." Harper Innovations didn't start with just me. The true co-founder was Gregory Cross, a brilliant engineer, my best friend from college. He was also the man I loved. But he died in a car crash in 1987. "No. That's not right, he was killed." A gasp echoed from the back rows. I heard the sound of a plastic cup dropping, the sharp inhale of a woman holding her breath. The day Gregory died, a transfer file was submitted to the court, transferring all of his shares to my brother, Douglas Winters. Your father. Gregory never signed it. I know, because that signature was forged. And I've kept the handwriting analysis report for the past 30 years. I stayed silent, because the company was still fragile. But now, Harper Innovations is strong. The truth needs to be returned to the one who deserves it. That's why I've left everything to you. The only one in the family who never bowed to power or money. I looked up, my eyes swept across the crowd. My father's face had turned pale. Aunt Heather's mouth was hanging open. A few people began whispering, like a storm about to break. I folded the letter, my voice unnervingly calm. My aunt left all of her shares in Harper Innovations worth approximately $67 million to me, with one condition: that the truth be revealed in front of the entire family. And I had done it. But I knew the real battle was just beginning. I didn't know how long I had stood at that cold wooden podium, under the eyes of hundreds exploding with shock, fear, anger, and disbelief. Every word in Aunt Diane's letter still echoed in my mind like the toll of inescapable judgment. My father Douglas Winters was trembling, lips pressed so tightly they bled, as if opening his mouth would unleash something he could never take back. But I wasn't done. Because in my bag was still the heaviest part. A thick stack of documents wrapped in old leather, along with several black and white photographs, faded with time. I pulled out the first photo, holding it up for the breathless crowd. "This is Gregory Cross," I said clearly, my voice steady. "A structural engineer, my aunt's best friend from college, co-founder of Harper Innovations. And this," I held up the second photo, "is him with the blueprint, the original prototype of the self-healing bioconcrete, the technology Harper Innovations built its empire on for the last 3 decades. The third photo shook the room. Gregory and Diane, shaking hands. Between them a handwritten contract, with the words, 50/50 ownership, Harper Innovations, LLC. I heard someone choke, a woman behind me started crying, and Mr. Bell, the attorney, sat in the front row, silently nodding at me. According to my aunt's letter, I continued, they built the company from the ground up. Gregory was the technical mind, my aunt was the strategist. They had promised to run Harper Innovations together, as 2 halves of one soul. I took a deep breath and pulled out a copy of the forensic report. My voice slowed, each word striking like a blade against wood. But in April of 1987, Gregory died in a car accident. The police ruled it mechanical failure, but no one checked the brakes. Until Miss Diane hired a private investigator in 1992. The results showed the brake lines had been cut with a specialized tool. The church erupted in horrified gasps. Aunt Heather nearly dropped her purse. Some of my relatives shot to their feet, mouths agape. But I kept going, my voice no longer that of the quiet niece they once ignored, but of someone carrying the weight of truth. 4 hours after Gregory's death, a legal file was submitted to the federal court, transferring all of his shares and founding rights to Douglas Winters. I turned toward my father. He was shaking his head, face ghost white, forehead drenched in sweat. "No, you don't know anything," he croaked. I held up the signature analysis. "This is the forensic handwriting report. The signature on that file was forged. And this is the comparison sheet with Gregory's real signatures. From bank documents, handwritten letters, and academic records. The person who forged it was you, my father. Douglas Winters." Chairs clattered loudly. A few people left their seats, too shocked to maintain decorum. Aunt Heather threw her purse to the ground and screamed. "No. You're lying, it's ours, this girl is a traitor." "I'm only telling the truth," I replied, my gaze sharp as a blade slicing through every word she hurled at me. "The truth you all tried to bury for 36 years. A deadly silence blanketed the room. No one moved. Not a single cough. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. I pulled out the final document, an amended will, clearly stating that all personal assets, shares and controlling interest in Harper Innovations were to be transferred to Clara Winters. That is, me, with a portion set aside to establish the Gregory Cross Foundation, a fund supporting young engineers in the field of sustainable construction technology. And I ended this speech like delivering a final verdict. Today, I didn't come here only to mourn. I came to return the truth to the one who was robbed of everything, and to rebuild what should have been his from the start. My father sat still in the front row, his eyes hollow. Every trace of life seemed drained from him. No one reached out to him, no handshake, no defense. Aunt Heather left the church immediately after. My two cousins, the ones who used to laugh behind my back at every family gathering, stood frozen, like they had just realized the throne they thought they'd inherited was actually a pool of blood. After the ceremony, I returned to my car, opened the door, but didn't get in right away. The Portland sky had turned a smoky gray, not raining, but suffocatingly heavy. I sat in the driver's seat, hands trembling uncontrollably. The final letter from my aunt was still tucked safely inside my jacket. I hadn't read it aloud. She had left me a message of my own. I took it out. My dearest Clara. You did it. Not everyone has the courage to speak the truth a whole family tried to bury. I've watched you grow up, endure every stab in the back, every look of contempt, every cruel word. But I knew, from the moment you unlocked the secret compartment in that mahogany box when you were 13, that you were the one who would do what I couldn't. Not because I was weak, but because I had to wait for the right person. And that person was you. Now, do the right thing. Use what I've left behind not to build an empire, but to restore justice. With all my love, Aunt Diane. I folded the letter. For the first time in 3 days, I cried. Not out of sorrow, but because, for the first time, I saw a real light rising from the ashes of my family. No one moved. It was as if all of St. Augustine's had been locked in place by some invisible force. No one dared to shift, no one could speak. Everyone remained frozen in the aftershock of what I had just read. I could hear the wind whistling through the stained glass behind me, but even that sound was muffled by something heavier than silence. Truth. And that truth I had just dragged into the light, stripping away the prestigious title of Douglas Winters, my father. The man once praised as the founder of Harper Innovations. Now he was just a shadow, trembling on the edge of the front pew. No longer a symbol. No longer a leader. But a man stained beyond redemption. You're making this up, a male voice rang out from the middle rows. It was Blake, my cousin, Aunt Heather's only son. His face flushed red, his fists clenched white. Your father built this empire. No one can erase what he accomplished. Aunt Diane was delusional and left her will to someone who contributed nothing. I looked him straight in the eye, my voice sharp as a razor. If I made it up, then why do I have a verified handwriting analysis? Why do I have photographs of the original contract between Gregory Cross and Diane Harper? Why is it known throughout the engineering industry that the original self-healing concrete patent was filed by Cross, not Winters? I turned to Mr. Bell. He stood up and slowly pulled out another envelope. We had the documents notarized before the funeral. All evidence has already been submitted to the Oregon State Business Court. Blake fell silent. Heather collapsed back into her seat like she'd been punched in the chest. And my father? He stood. No defiance, no challenge, no rage. Just emptiness in his eyes. I did it, he said, his voice hoarse, so soft no one could believe they'd heard him right. I forged the signature. I transferred the ownership. But I didn't kill Gregory. The brake line was cut, I reminded him coldly. He looked at me, as if hoping I'd retract something, throw him a lifeline. But I didn't. I hadn't come to comfort. I had come to unlock the gates of hell they sealed shut 36 years ago. Reporters had already flooded in by the time the speech ended. Though the funeral had been announced as private, no one could stop a story this explosive from leaking. Flash after flash lit up the room, microphones shoved forward, and there I stood. A 34-year-old woman, who had never held an executive position, now suddenly the most powerful heir in the Pacific Northwest's construction technology industry. Are you planning to press charges against your father? How do you think shareholders will react to this announcement? Do you intend to sell your shares or change the executive board? I gave only one answer before stepping away from the mic. I will not run, I will not stay silent, and I will not let a company built on blood continue to survive on lies. The post-funeral reception was suffocating. Every handshake I received now came not out of celebration but fear or calculation. Awkward hugs, avoided eye contact. My father disappeared without a word. Heather left after screaming in my face that I had destroyed everything. A few relatives came close, whispering things like, "Maybe you should reconsider. Family is still family." But I didn't answer. I was no longer the quiet girl at the kids' table during Christmas dinner, forced to smile at people who looked down on me, just because I chose to teach at a public school instead of joining Harper Innovations at 21. That night, I returned to Diane's estate. The living room still held the scent of white flowers and lavender. I sat in my aunt's armchair, looking out over the backyard, where the hybrid roses she once planted were still blooming, even as autumn had begun to knock. Beside me was the second file I hadn't opened in public, the one Aunt Diane had left for me alone. I opened it. Inside was a detailed list of Gregory Cross's assets at the time of his death, along with an unsigned transfer contract, clearly stating that his shares were to go to his biological daughter in case of an unexpected event. The girl's name, Samantha Cross. I froze. A name I'd never heard before, never mentioned at any family meeting. And next to it, a photo. Diane sitting beside a young woman with dark hair, sharp eyes that looked just like Gregory's. On the back of the picture, handwritten, "She doesn't know anything. I paid for her college, her master's, and now her PhD at UC Berkeley. Clara, if you're reading this, find Samantha. She deserves to know who her father really was." I closed the file, my heart pounding. The truth wasn't over. It was like an iceberg. What I had just revealed was only the tip. And I knew the next thing I had to do was find Samantha Cross. A daughter of the man who was killed to build an empire. Someone who had the right to know that her father wasn't a coward who walked away, but a man, betrayed and murdered. Someone who might be an ally, or the next bolt of lightning to strike the ruins I had just dug up from the past. I found her at a conference in San Francisco, where young researchers presented innovations in biomaterial technology. She stood on stage, presenting a self-cleaning material that could neutralize toxic gases in the air into pure oxygen. The hall was silent, every eye fixed on her words. But I didn't hear any of it. I just looked into her eyes, dark brown, sharp and completely unaware of who she really was. Samantha Cross. She had no idea she was the daughter of Harper Innovations' co-founder, the man who was killed so someone else could climb to the throne, through blood and betrayal. After her talk, I approached her, handed her my business card and said only one sentence. "I have a story you need to hear, about your father, about the truth." We sat across from each other in a small cafe near the UC Berkeley campus. She didn't say much. Her eyes were cautious, her face tense. The look of someone who's learned to defend herself all her life. I placed a thick envelope on the table. "This is everything I have. A copy of the original contract between Gregory Cross and Diane Harper, the forensic analysis of the car crash, and records of the anonymous payments Diane made to you for over 15 years. She opened it, and each page hit her like a blow to the chest. I didn't interrupt. Didn't interject. I just sat there and watched a person move from suspicion, to horror, to numbness from a pain she never knew she carried. "This can't be real," she murmured. I thought, my dad abandoned my mom. She never said anything about him. I thought he was just some failed engineer. I even took my mother's last name. I nodded, my voice tight. He wasn't a failure, he was a genius. And he died because of it. Diane. My aunt kept this secret her whole life, but she didn't stay completely silent. She supported you, helped you study, protected you from the filthy power games my family created. Why her? Samantha asked, almost angry. Why didn't she say anything? Why wait until she was dead to reveal it all? Because Harper Innovations wasn't strong enough to survive the truth back then. If she had gone public, thousands of employees would have lost everything. Diane never chose to punish by destroying, she waited. To fix it a different way. I pulled out the final document. A certified copy of an amended will, official, court-stamped, from the state of Oregon. Diane left you 30% of Harper Innovations shares. As compensation. The rest, the controlling interest, she left to me. Not because I'm more deserving, but because I'm the only one she trusted to pass that control to the right person. Samantha stared at me in disbelief. Her hands shook as she held the document. In her eyes was a storm. Tragedy, justice, and opportunity colliding all at once. So what do you want now? She asked quietly. Do you want me to take your side, or just forgive the past? I looked straight at her. I want us to rebuild, just like Gregory and Diane dreamed. Co-lead Harper Innovations. Return it to what it was meant to be. Innovative, transparent, and just. I can't do that alone. But with you, Gregory Cross's daughter, I believe we can. 3 days later, Samantha walked into Harper Innovations headquarters in Portland. As soon as she stepped into the lobby, a wave of whisper spread like a shock wave. Her name had started appearing in trade news. Shareholders gossiped. The board was in turmoil. But I stood beside her. And the first thing I did as the new controller of the company was appoint her as Chief Technology Officer, CTO, a position that matched her talent and honored the dream her father carried before it was stolen. The press conference was held a week later. I stood at the podium, Samantha at my side, flashes erupting like fireworks. I didn't hide anything. All the truth had come to light. Harper Innovations didn't begin with one person, but with two, an engineer and a strategist, Gregory Cross and Diane Harper. Today, we correct a mistake that's lasted more than 3 decades. I turned to Samantha, speaking to the entire press and shareholder audience. This is Samantha Cross, Gregory's daughter, the new co-owner of the company. Of course, not everyone welcomed it. Some old shareholders protested, called for investigations. A small group threatened to dump their shares. But the majority, especially longtime engineers, stood and applauded when Samantha stepped down from the stage and gave her first speech as the rightful heir. I didn't know who my father was, she said. But now I do. And I won't let him be forgotten in the shadows. I'm not here for fame or money. I'm here for what he and Diane started. Their dream will continue. And it will finally belong to the people who deserve it. That evening, Samantha and I sat together in Diane's garden, where I first found that fateful mahogany box. It was drizzling. The lavender was soaked. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive fully, she said. And I don't expect you to, I replied. I just hope I'm strong enough to do what's right, even if it's heartbreakingly late. She stayed quiet, then reached out and gently touched a lavender bloom. Maybe. Beauty really can grow from where guilt was once buried, she whispered. I nodded. Diane used to say that, and she planted that seed in both of us. 3 days after the press conference, my father disappeared. No text, no call, no one knew how he left. His penthouse at River Place remained locked. The antique clock he loved sat quietly on the shelf, like a silent witness to his wordless exit. I didn't go looking for him. Not out of hate. But because I understood, he needed to disappear. A week later, I received a call from a rehabilitation center in Bend, Oregon. a social worker informed me that he had checked himself in for alcohol and sedative withdrawal, in a state of severe mental exhaustion. She said he didn't ask for any family to be contacted, only mentioned one name: Clara. I didn't visit. Not because I hated him, but because I knew this was the only form of redemption he could choose for himself. For the first time in his life, he wasn't hiding behind money, reputation, or power. He was facing himself. And that alone was a punishment deeper than any sentence. Meanwhile, Harper Innovations didn't collapse as many had predicted. On the contrary, it came back to life. The media may have torn each other apart out there, but the real people behind this machine, the engineers, researchers, and longtime staff, they stayed. They didn't follow me because of the Winters name. They didn't follow Samantha because of the Cross name. They stayed because they believed in the vision Gregory and Diane once set, to build a future that was sustainable, transparent, and just. And that's where we began. For the first 3 months, Samantha and I barely slept. We removed 3 former board members involved in shady contracts. We released a full audit of the supply chain, exposing corrupt intermediaries, and replacing them with partners who were more transparent and sustainable. I moved my office from the top floor down to the 3rd, on the same level as the research and engineering teams. Samantha turned the largest meeting room into a prototype lab. Every morning, we walked around the headquarters together, greeted employees, and listened to direct feedback. We didn't call it restructuring. We called it rebirth. The press scoffed at first. 2 inexperienced women playing idealists? A billion-dollar company now led by a high school teacher and a fellowship researcher. But 6 months later, when Harper stock rose 17% after landing a federal contract to supply biomaterials, the laughter stopped. We launched BioSkin, to a surface coating that purifies air and resists urban corrosion. It was the same technology Samantha had once presented at Berkeley. This time, it was real, made by the very company her father once dreamed of. And we did it without hiding anything. All research, financial, and governance reports were published regularly, unfiltered by media teams. Every dollar was accounted for. The new company slogan was engraved in the main lobby. Not built to hide, built to be transparent. On the 1-year anniversary of Diane's passing, Samantha and I held a small ceremony in the rose garden behind the estate. Only close friends attended. Veteran employees, a few engineers who once worked with Gregory, and some of Diane's old friends. We planted a new lavender bush and placed a small stone plaque beneath it. For what was buried, now growing back in the light. After the ceremony, I received a small envelope from the rehab center in Bend. It was a handwritten letter, the shaky handwriting unmistakably my father's. Clara, you did what I never had the courage to do in my life. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I only hope that if one day you look back, you won't see your life as revenge, but as restoration. And if you're living that way, then I haven't completely failed. Douglas. I folded the letter and placed it in the wooden drawer of my desk, next to Diane's worn notebook and the original contract between her and Gregory. Not to forget, but to remember. To remember that good things can be built from what's broken, if we have the courage to face the truth. Today, 1 year and 7 months since Diane passed, Harper Innovations was named one of America's 50 most transparent companies by the National Institute for Business Ethics. We weren't number 1 on the list. But I smiled as I sat in the auditorium beside Samantha. 2 women with completely different pasts, yet sharing the same legacy. Not of money, but of responsibility. Samantha turned to me and whispered, "Diane must be smiling." I nodded, my hand gently clasping hers. She didn't just leave us a company, she left us a chance to do the right thing, and we didn't waste it. I sat alone in Diane's old library, which now served as my workspace whenever I wasn't at headquarters. The dark wooden shelves, the soft amber glow of the Tiffany desk lamp, and the faint scent of lavender from the cushion behind me. Everything remained just as it had been. Except for one thing. Diane was no longer here to guide me. On the desk was her worn brown leather notebook. The words she once wrote in purple ink were still clear. Do the right thing, even if it makes you lonely. I used to see that as a noble philosophy. But only now, after everything, the collapse, the betrayal, the light of truth, did I understand. It wasn't just an ideal. It was a survival reminder. I picked up a piece of paper and began writing Diane a letter. Not because I thought she could read it, but because I knew some things need to be said, for the heart to rest. Dear Aunt Diane. Today, the season has begun to change. The rose bushes in the garden have started to close, preparing for winter. But the lavender plants we once planted, they still stand tall, even as frost blankets the edges of the grass. I don't know if you'd be happy seeing everything now, if you were still alive. But I do know one thing for certain. What you left behind wasn't just wealth shares or a name. You left me a chance, a burden, a legacy heavier than gold, the truth. And the responsibility to live in accordance with it. Harper Innovations is still standing. Samantha is currently developing a new materials system for the Seattle redevelopment zone. The engineers call her the right hand of the future. As for me, I'm no longer the Clara Winters the family used to mock. I am the one who protects what my father denied. You know, there was a time I thought the truth would destroy everything. But it turns out, the truth was what saved it all. Not by erasing the past, but by facing it so it wouldn't be repeated. I'm not perfect, but I try every day. And I think that's what you hoped for most. Thank you. Not for leaving me a company, but for trusting me enough to hand over what no one else dared to carry. With love, Clara. I folded the letter and placed it in the top drawer, where Diane used to keep the first photo she ever took with Gregory Cross. That frame was still there. And for the first time, I no longer saw them as just shadows in memory. They were the ones who laid the foundation, who sacrificed, who were betrayed, but who also left behind their faith in the next generation. The next day, Samantha and I attended a national conference on sustainable development. We didn't go to speak, only to listen. But during a discussion on business ethics, a young student stood up and asked us, if you could change just one thing in the company's history, what would it be? I looked at Samantha, she nodded, signaling for me to answer. I stood up, my voice rising through the room like a promise. I wouldn't change anything. Because it was the pain and the injustice that helped us understand the value of transparency and honesty. Without the betrayal, we wouldn't have known what courage really meant. Without the wrongful death, we wouldn't have known what justice really costs. I paused briefly, then finished. My company isn't built on concrete or steel. It's rebuilt from truth. And that is what makes it unbreakable. That night, I returned to Diane's estate, standing in the garden where the rose bushes had already shed their leaves. I didn't cry. I simply closed my eyes, feeling the cold wind brush my shoulders, and imagined her hand resting lightly on them. Like so many times before, I heard her voice again in my memory. Sometimes, Clara, we don't need to destroy to punish. We just need to let the truth find its way. And the truth had found its way. Through me, through Samantha, through everyone who chose to stay, not for money, not for glory, but for the reason this company was created in the first place. To do something good. A month later, we inaugurated a new workspace named the Gregory Cross Innovation Center. The bronze plaque at the entrance read, "For the dreams that were stolen. And for those who dared to seek justice, not with fire and swords, but with truth and conviction." When the cover cloth was pulled away, Samantha wept. I held her hand, no words needed. We knew we had fulfilled the dream of two people long gone. One late winter night, I opened an email from a young employee who had only been with us for 3 months. There was one sentence in it that kept me silent for a long time. I don't know who you were before, but now, I just want to thank you for making this company a place I can trust to begin my career. I read it again and again, then smiled. Not out of pride, but because I knew Diane was right. Sometimes, legacy isn't in the numbers. It's not in the assets. It's in how we fix what was wrong. With everything we have. And everything we've lost. And in that garden, in the chill of late season, I saw a new sprout rising from the damp soil. Lavender. The flower of resilience. Diane once said. True beauty is what grows from the most painful places. Today I believe she was right. Clara's story isn't just a journey of uncovering the truth. It's a reminder that the most precious legacy isn't money. It's the moral responsibility and courage to face the past. In a world where power and fame are too often built on secrets, Clara chose transparency as a way to heal. She reminds us that sometimes, healing doesn't come through revenge, but by rebuilding the right way, on a foundation of truth. What do you think about Clara's journey and the choices she made? Leave your thoughts below and share your reflections. Don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful real-life stories about family, justice, and resilience.